Good afternoon, and welcome to another episode of the BG Video Insights cast. I'm here with a good friend of mine and a colleague. I'll go with my colleague first, Mike Sherry. Hello, Mike. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
My neighbor and fearless leader of the city of Revere, Mayor Brian Arrigo. Welcome, Mr. Mayor. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Son. Good to see you, Mike. And thanks for having me.
Well, I was explaining to you earlier that we like to bring people from industry onto these conversations because Mike and I can talk all day long, but it's good to hear from folks that are actually in the trenches doing the work. Now, I always ask this question, and you have a great answer for it, but I love your story about just a kid from Oak Island who now has the corner office. Give us the Reader's Digest version, how you got there.
Yeah, that's a great question, and one that we've talked about a few times. Yeah, for anyone who's listening or watching, Oak Island is a little neighborhood in Revere, right behind Kelly's Roast Beef. Pretty, small neighborhood. Really, everyone knows each other. It's really tight knit, and pretty humble little spot. And I grew up in a household that really favored and valued public service. And one where my dad was involved in everything from the PTA to ultimately being on the city council for a few years. Although his advice, and he's passed, he's been gone from us for a few years now, but he did get to see me get elected mayor. But he always gave me the advice that to never get in politics, especially on the local level.
How's that working out for you?
And yeah, exactly, right. He was frustrated, I think, by the process, and we had a lot of great conversations about that, and really framed my worldview and my perception of the importance of local government, the importance of public service. He had been frustrated by it, but he still kind of had understood and passed down those virtues of how important understanding your community is and representing your community and really just trying to make your city or your town or your PTA or your school a little bit better than you left it. And so yeah, it's been a long, windy journey, but one that landed me here almost 5 years ago now, and it's really the greatest job in the world. Although probably one of the most challenging, and it is one of the most rewarding jobs I could ever imagine anyone having.
Sure. Well, I know that our history goes back to me complaining about traffic on my street when you were a counselor at large. And, this young guy, glasses, shows up and says, I think I can help. I said, okay, here's another politician who's going to help me with this traffic. And they now lovingly call the little island at the end of Dale Street Martelli Island because of the effort that you and others put forth to get that done. And traffic coming down Park Ave is no longer an issue. So I thank you for that, Mr. Mayor. But, and I've been in the city for almost 20 years, and you've been in here longer, obviously. The city has changed, especially the way we our local economy. Speak to that. Speak to how that's changed over the years and sort of what your vision is moving forward.
Yeah, the city has changed immensely, right? And it's grown immensely. Growing up, our economy was really based around Wonderland Dog Track, which was a dog track really kind of in the center of the city, right by the Blue Line, right by Wonderland T Station, and the Suffolk Downs horse track, which is on the Suffolk Downs and in between Suffolk Downs and Beachmont T stations. And those two businesses and those two sites were really the center of our economy. I worked at Wonderland at one point. I think probably at some point at least half of the city had either worked at Suffolk Downs or Wonderland.
Wow.
And it was just kind of a rite of passage, almost like working at Kelly's Roast Beef. That's the other place where everyone seems to have worked. But I led dogs out while I worked at Wonderland, and I did that when I was in college at Suffolk. It was a great kind of night job that I could do, and one that I could get paid pretty well as part of the union. at the time, and got to understand the economy of dog racing, which is really interesting. But flash forward now, and there's a over $1 billion development, mixed use development happening at Suffolk Downs. We've got hopefully some great plans that will come out for Wonderland, and we've made sure, and it was really important from this seat, is to make sure that when development is happening, or when growth is happening in a community, that it really be driven by the residents, right? And that they have a say, and that residents kind of understand the values that they bring to the table around around development, and how those values can be kind of portrayed and brought to life in a development that happens, right? So what we did really early on was made sure that we started working on a master plan. We brought the folks at Suffolk Downs, we brought them in, and we were able to kind of have a really exhaustive public process where I appointed an advisory board to help guide the potential development, and just to get buy-in and feedback from the community at the outset, rather than having a confrontational kind of setup. And so making sure that there are values grounded in whatever somebody comes in and wants to do is really important, and allows for I think sometimes heated but important kind of debate over what the right percentage of affordable housing is, or what the right mixture of commercial versus residential is, or what kind of commercial development or residential development. So, and I'll give you an example. For Suffolk Downs, our focus is really on commercial development because sites like Wonderland and Suffolk Downs had always been the economic engine of the city. And when they went dormant, our economy went dormant. And so to create jobs, and a lot of the people that live in the city obviously leave the city to go to work. We wanted to flip the script on that a little bit, and make sure that people were coming to Revere to potentially go to work. And so that was a really important and a key piece to whatever development would happen at Suffolk Downs. And with the plans that they have, and with the construction happening later this year, we'll see 150 times the number of jobs in that site than there are currently in the city of Revere.
Wow.
That, I mean, and it's a game changer, right? It's a game changer for our tax base, our commercial tax base, but just for the opportunity for residents to be able to work where they live is really, that represents an unprecedented opportunity. And so whatever, and being able to kind of guide that project through to the beginning of construction has been really a great accomplishment, and just a great thing for the city of Revere.
Sure. I couldn't agree more as a resident and taxpayer. Actually, I bring Mike onto these conversations because Mike often runs part of the process that you described at the front end, because the NIMBYism and the contention that happens around some of these projects. Now, I'd like to kind of toss the microphone to Mike real quick to talk about kind of the communications aspect of these projects.
Yeah, I noticed it when you mentioned it too, Mayor Arrigo, that public process is so important for getting projects off on the right foot. And we're often advising either developers or municipalities that want to see a particular initiative succeed, and they know that it won't succeed without the right buy-in from the public. So I guess I wanted to ask if you wouldn't mind sharing a little bit about how the lessons that you learned in this process that you just described for Revere maybe could be applied to in other municipalities, or even for private developers with large scale projects. whose scope are so big that it almost requires cooperation with the city as well. Any insights that you think Revere, any lessons that Revere has for other cities and towns, Massachusetts or elsewhere? I know folks would be interested to hear.
Yeah, that's a great question, great point. And I'll say at the outset that we by no means do it perfectly, right? And I think it's important.
I've
I
never seen the public
really
process with every single person 100% happy.
Right.
Except for the
That's
ones that
probably
we
an
run.
unattainable goal. But just to get across the finish line is an accomplishment.
Right, and getting either the city council vote that you need or the zoning board of appeals
Right.
vote that is required. Those that ends up being the measure of success, right?
Right.
And but having I always try to approach everything that I do, especially in this role, with a growth mindset, right? And so always be trying to learn, pick things up, and you're I think a lot of times, and Don knows this really well, in the city, we are at the same time, you're flying the plane, building the plane, and drawing the blueprints, right? And so,
in that order,
so there have definitely been some things that, some pitfalls and some minefields that people need to look out for. I think from the leadership of the city position, the important thing, the most important thing is connecting and communicating with the residents, right? And making sure that there's clear information coming out, that it's consistent and that it's accurate. That alone builds the trust that people understand, okay, this is something that's either important and can work and will have, the values baked into it, or it's not. And so I think for our community, we've had a really troubled past with development. And if you look at, all you have to do is drive down the beach and see some of the things that have happened in the past over the last 30, 40 years, and you see that there were people that came into our community, as short as 30 years ago, and promised this and really delivered this maybe, and so I think the other really important thing for our communities to be picky, right? And for us, being on the beach with incredible public access, public transportation access, incredible beach views, 3 MBTA stops, and sharing a border with the city of Boston. I've learned, and I think we've learned as a city, that we can be a little bit pickier, and we can be a little bit we have higher standards and hold people to higher standards, right? And so if the residents understand that these are our standards, this is where we are, these are our values, and we're gonna apply those evenly and equally, throughout the process and throughout every process that we have, I think that goes a long way in terms of building building a culture that isn't necessarily steeped in NIMBYism, right? And that's still to say that there are going to be people that are going to oppose everything no matter what. But
sure.
But what we've seen, especially, and again, I speak for Revere, what we've seen is a real change in the shifting kind of dynamics of, folks who initially thought that words like affordable housing were really, you almost didn't say them at all because they were kind of viewed so negatively, to now people are calling, and the residents and even electeds now are talking more about how much affordable housing are we providing to the folks that have been in the community for a long time. How do we make sure that people who want to be in Revere can continue to live here? And that's a little bit of a shift, and it's because of the growth that we've seen. People see the challenges of staying in a really well thought out and highly kind of touted community.
Yeah.
It becomes a little bit of a challenge. But I think at its core, anything when you're trying to do anything that can be difficult, and sometimes getting a special permit for a development, or getting a variance at a ZBA level can be incredibly difficult. It really starts at the very, very, very beginning. It starts with that first conversation that a potential developer has with either the mayor or the town council or the board of selectmen, or the ZBA. That's where that really, that's where the rubber hits the road.
Yeah.
And the importance of clear, direct, transparent communication.
Yeah.
And that's between city and developer, and between city or town and resident, right? And kind of what we did with, and I use Suffolk Downs as an example. What we did with Suffolk was really try to make sure that people understood the quality of their track record, and understood that if they're promising this, they're gonna be able to deliver on this, and we're gonna use our I'm willing to use my political capital to let people know that this is where my standards are, and this is where the developer's standards are, and this is what we're going to see happen.
Yeah.
And that takes a lot of trust. It takes a lot of trust, and you've built, like, the trust builds off itself. So if people see it, and they actually can touch it and feel it and see it for themselves, they understand the vision, and they'll say, oh no, this is where we are. And a perfect example is down the beach, where there's a lot of pushback. We push for amenities down the beach. We have a couple of new restaurants that have opened up, and that will continue to open up, and that really changes the conversation, because people, if you tell people there's going to be some great places for you to be able to go out and enjoy an evening on the beach and have dinner, and then that happens, and then people go to it and they see it, that the trust that's built there gives me credibility, it gives developer credibility, and kind of everyone understands the vision.
And you're not lying. You're not lying at all, because I've done that. I've when a couple of restaurants had opened up that were kind of not like your typical thing that would open up on Revere Beach before. My wife and I have gone to it, and it is top notch. It's like you tell people about it, and they say, "That's in Revere?" Yeah, and I always ask, why not Revere, right? So sorry, I'm putting my Revere hat on. Go ahead, Mike.
Good job waving the flag, Don. I just want to say something that really rang true to me that you said, Mayor Arrigo, is making sure there isn't a huge gap between what's promised and what's delivered. So many of the towns that we come into when there's a project in trouble, almost always we can look back at the recent history, and there's been a series of promises either from the town or from the developer about a project that didn't come to pass. And it's not to say the project was a bad project, but they still promised the moon and only gave you the stars or something like that. And it just breeds distrust, and it makes the next project hard to do. And obviously towns can't control developers, but from the town's perspective, I thought what you said was so important, because when you promise too much, and when you make unrealistic promises about the project, it may get you over the finish line in that one instance, but you really poison the well for future projects and future work. And from a long-term perspective, and this is not speaking as a municipal official, but someone who tries to help them get their stuff done, from a long-term perspective, it seems to me that being realistic about your promises and then doing everything you can to fulfill those promises post-approval is the fastest way to make your life easier for every subsequent project down the road. So I was glad to see you mention that, because as people sometimes have to come in afterwards with a mop and clean up the mess. It really does make a difference when you have a positive track record of keeping your word. To
Something as simple as, clear and concise and transparent communication sounds easy, but it can be difficult for some. And actually, I'd like to pivot the conversation real quick, because obviously, we're all doing this remotely. Otherwise, we'd be sitting in your office because of what's going on with COVID-19. And you as a leader of our city have had to sort of quarterback what the city is doing to keep their residents safe and healthy and so on and so forth. Love to sort of hear you talk about just the communications flow around something that is extremely fluid and that seems to be changing, even 2 months ago to today and to tomorrow. That situation changes very, very fluidly. So just speak from a communication standpoint in terms of what the city is doing to educate and keep residents abreast of what's going on.
Yeah. And so I think even the communication piece really is built off of the foundation that we put in place, right? So when this kind of all hit and we started getting, I can remember very vividly, we had a meeting in the beginning of March that a few mayors had kind of put together, and there were about 45 municipal officials, municipal executives who got together, mayors, town managers, city managers, and got a briefing at Partners Healthcare in Somerville. And it was made clear to us at that point that, for the conversation was basically, you're going to have to figure out how to shut down your cities for probably 8 weeks. Right. And so that was like the opening of the conversation, and so everyone kind of looked at each other and said, okay, like,
what does that look
where
like?
do we start? What does that look like? And what's the lieutenant governor was there, and Mayor Walsh was there, and it was kind of it was just a health briefing, and kind of everyone left that kind of really like, just it was very sobering, right? And so what we did, immediately after that, I brought together what we ended up calling an emergency response team. But I just brought the people that I felt like I needed to have from the city together to start to formulate what we were going to do and how we were going to kind of work together to respond to this, to the public health crisis that was kind of impending. And so by putting that kind of infrastructure in place and then having, a clear kind of organization around that, and making sure that it was a public health, like I came at it from a public health standpoint rather than a public safety standpoint. And so I said, this is a public health crisis. We need to have a public health officials at the top of the organization, and we're going to kind of all kind of branch off and have our own pieces of it. But this is a public health issue, and we've been lucky to have a really great chair of our board of health, and we have a director of health and human services in the city that have stepped up, and they did incredible work. But putting that structure in place really allowed for us to be able to have the communication piece really strong. And so, like any crisis, you want to make sure, again, that your communication's clear, concise, transparent, that you're predictable, right? Predictability is so important. And, you see it from the governor down, where the governor's having his daily briefings right around the same time, same information, just kind of a constant flow of communication. And the difficulty was, and it's kind of a little bit different now than it was, 2 months ago, but the difficulty was around getting out information accurately and making sure that it was actually relevant, because things change so quickly and so often. But really making sure that like we put out a press release every day. We have an automatic text message that gets sent out with our press release. So we're kind of letting people know what's happening. And aside from that, we have reverse 911 phone calls that I would do myself, which normally I wasn't doing, but I thought it was really important to heighten the awareness for the community that I deliver those messages, especially early on during the crisis. And then thinking kind of innovatively about what else to do. One thing that we did during the crisis was we partnered with a company called Sufa. They provide signs to cities and towns, and it may not sound like much, but if you put a sign in the right place where there's either public transportation or a high level of walkability, you're able to hit people that maybe aren't scrolling through their social media feed, or maybe aren't reading the Revere Journal, or maybe aren't getting a reverse 911 phone call. And then the other layer for us, which is something that's really important, is making sure that your communication is delivered in the languages that you need it to be delivered in. And so we've made sure since the beginning of the crisis that our information goes out in multiple languages. We actually set up a little link on our city website to make sure that if people get email or text message notifications, they can get that in multiple languages if need be. And providing everything from a mailing that we did out to the community in 4 different languages, to the social media updates, and to the traditional media, trying to make sure that I'm getting on kind of regional news broadcasts and letting them know what we're doing and how we're responding to some of the issues that we've had. And that, again, if you're clear and concise, and your messaging is predictable and consistent, you build trust with people, and then we've been able to make sure that people are getting the right message out. And
that's great.
And I think that building that trust also helps with the press, right? So
Absolutely.
If they know that they're going to get something from us, we actually had folks who would be calling us saying, "When are you going to give us your information? We're waiting." And it's like, usually we send our press release out by maybe 4 or 5 o'clock by the end of the day, and we had some information that we had to wait on and maybe we sent something out at 6, and we would have news or radio calling saying, "Well, usually you send something out by now. Do you have something coming?" So building that trust, and I don't think opportunity is the right word to use, but using the challenge around COVID-19 and the challenge around a public health crisis, to really step up your game and say, this is what we have to do for our residents because this is so important. It gave us definitely an opportunity to probably communicate more in a couple of months than we've ever communicated with the city. And Don can probably answer that question.
I can attest to that. And frankly,
we've probably communicated more over the last 3 months than we have for the last 5 years.
Well, in certain situations, it's not bad to over communicate. And I think that as a resident, I think you hit the nail on the head. And got a few minutes here before we wrap it up. But obviously, I think that your message there about transparency, consistency, solid communications is not just to be able to apply for those in your seat in municipalities, but just brands in general. And us as humans, as we're communicating with our neighbors and so on and so forth. I mean, clear and concise communication sometimes gets lost in an environment that is a scroll and a tweet away. So as we sort of wrap it up here, Mr. Mayor, I would love you to just what's next for the city of Revere. I'll give you couple minutes to kind of go through what you're really excited about as the new norm sets in, and whatever that is. Maybe city branded face masks, I guess. But what's next for the city of Revere? If you want to wrap it up in a couple minutes.
Yeah, there's a lot going on, and a lot of great things, even during this public health crisis, and we're pretty well positioned to emerge from this crisis in a solid place. But one thing that I do want to kind of mention and really just kind of maybe finish off on is around kind of racial tensions and the things that we've seen happening,
Sure.
Around the country, and how we're kind of working on that. And I've made it clear that it's really important for positions of power and in the city of Revere that that may be me, it may be the superintendent of schools, maybe the police chief, fire chief, but it may be other elected officials. But it's incredibly important for us to and what we've seen kind of locally is that there is a lot of energy coming from our young people and from our youth, and it's really important for us to use our positions to amplify and kind of accentuate the voices that we're hearing. And I truly feel like we're at this crossroads, not only as kind of a city, but as a country. And this is really an incredible opportunity for progress to be made that will hopefully eliminate the scourge that we know as racism. And it's going to be the young people that really lead that, and I get a little bit of goosebumps when I talk about that, and when I've even talked to some of the leaders of our kind of youth groups that are working really hard to affect change, is that that happens on the local level, and for young people to be engaged and involved in what's happening is so important. And it's our duty, and it's I think as mayor, it's my duty to really to allow them to amplify their voices and make sure that people hear their stories, that they're validated, and that we come up with real solutions, right? The other part of this, right? There's a part around sharing and validating and understanding and listening, right? So from my standpoint, for me to lead, I need to listen, especially on this issue, and to be able to then take the appropriate actions and move forward and create solutions. Because if you're not providing solutions and you're in a mayor's seat, you're not going to be in a mayor's seat very long. So this is going to be a challenge. And as challenging as a public health crisis like COVID-19 is, taking steps to really confront head-on racism, even at a local level, is a pretty daunting task. But it's gonna again come down to communication, making sure that people understand that you're being transparent and communicating in a predictable manner, what you want to see happen and what we're gonna get out of the work that will be done, over the course of probably a long while, and that it's going to be a long journey to get to a point where we leave. I leave the city in a better place than I got it, and that the people who are coming behind me, and especially the young people coming behind me, who fill leadership roles, can build off of that. And so, that's going to be a big challenge coming up. But we've got some great young people that are going to be the driving force of that, and we'll continue to make sure that we make progress and be able to really hear from young people and hear their experiences, and then take the appropriate action that's needed to make the city a better place.
It's important. I mean, we say the word challenge, but as you said, it's a really big opportunity. I really appreciate you bringing that to cap our conversation there, because it's probably the biggest thing on all of our minds now. We as a society need to do better and work collaboratively and communicate. So I want to thank you, the Honorable Brian Arrigo, for joining us today on the BG Video Insights cast. For those that are interested in what we do, hit the belfortgroup.com. And if you want to know what's going on in the city of Revere, there's a million things going on, revere.org, right? Any other ways to reach you, Mr. Mayor, if folks want to have comments or concerns, or how to get a hold of you?
Yeah, Twitter handle Mayor Arrigo, Facebook Mayor Arrigo,
Everywhere.
TikTok.
Are you on TikTok
I think
yet?
I'm on TikTok.
There you go.
I'm on TikTok.
Wonderful.
We're on Instagram, Mayor_Arrigo. So
very good.
We're if you. It doesn't take a lot to find me.
Just Google me.
And usually it's actually me responding to everything.
And I can attest to that. I can attest to that.
He can attest to that.
There you go.
He mentioned that issue that we solved near his house. I remember having coffee downtown, and when we sat down and talked about the issue and how we were going to kind of solve it. So,
well, I appreciate you joining us today. We'll see you soon,
pleasure.
sir.
Thank you again,
Be
Mayor.
well, guys. Take care.
Good to see you, Mike.